Thank you.
Thank you.
And the clicker, the magic button. First, I'll do a quick check-in. It sounds like everyone can hear me okay. I can hear my voice getting out there. Wonderful. Good morning to everyone here. I'm pretty excited to speak to this room. It's not often to get researchers and community in the same room and talk about things like startups, venture, entrepreneurship combined with research. And this happens to be the biggest project I work on campus here. So just as a little bit further introduction of myself so you can kind of know who I am and why I would be standing up here. I am a faculty in the business school. I have a really varied background, but the last 15 years of my career, I have specifically focused on startup and innovation, and I tie that through creative mindset. And I'm going to kind of walk us through a mindset exercise today and talk about what I see in the startup community. You're going to hear a lot of great tools today and a lot of great pathways, but what I'm hoping to do in this 45 minutes is to set your mind up to absorb the rest of the day a little bit differently than you would. Over the past 15 years, actually I've been a faculty for 25 years. A little fun fact about me, the first chunk of my career, I was an architecture professor, and then was so insanely curious about the complexities of architecture and how we get things built. I kept pushing and realizing it tied to finance, it tied to the world and business and the needs of people, which led me to an MBA in entrepreneurial finance, and eventually to understanding that architecture is everywhere. Everything is being designed. Everybody in here is designing. And those tools have helped me apply systems inside of startup and venture that are a little bit more untraditional and actually involve human behavior a lot more. So it's worked out pretty well. We have some pretty good successes. To kind of introduce what I do here on campus outside of teaching, my classroom is really about where do ideas come from and creativity and how can we make those structural. Everybody in this room has practiced that. Your research came from an idea and you have made it structural. And I'm going to tell you some fun stuff about that too. But the Doman Innovation Studio was set up by a graduate of the University of Utah, Cord Bowen, who has done really well in the state of Utah here and globally, or nationally, a little bit globally. And he came back and said, when I was a student, I was already starting my company, and I always felt bad. I was sitting in the back of the classroom, cranking away on whatever the company was doing, and I really wanted to be more of a student and potentially get more support while I was here. Let's build that out. Let's figure it out. We are a philanthropic effort to support startups, especially at the stage of prototype or early stage revenue where things are gaining traction. And we're built to be small. We don't work with more than 3 or 4 companies at a time. We take no equity. This is, again, philanthropic. And we're here to support the University of Utah. And even better, early on, we decided, why do we stop there? Let's support anybody who can get into the room. So if you're in the community of Utah and you find this stuff interesting today, or you hear some of what I'm saying as maybe what you need next, come talk to us. I'll be here today, and our program manager, Sam Martinez, is also here, and we can give you more information. So what we do is we do adaptive support for university startups. Those of you who know the university and TLO and Launchpad and NBC, these are really good fixed support systems for the university. Taylor Randall, when he came to us and the NBC and Launchpad, said, this is great, but here's where we can't meet the needs. We need something really flexible that can go pinch point really specific projects and bring deep expertise and networking to companies and just give them more time. And so we said, okay, I think we can build that. And that's what we've been doing for the last 3 years. So we are tied to everybody. We begun with really tremendous support from Launchpad, helping us understand the lay of the land and where the needs were. And then what I'm speaking to you about today is mainly with the Technology Licensing Office and the Vice President's Office for Research here on campus, which is the last leg on the table we've been building for about the last year and a half. In fact, some of our cohort members are here in the audience. And we've been running that program now in person, about a year and a half planning, but in person for about the last year. If you're wondering, okay, then what do you do in that? Well, what we do, here, I'll stop looking at the screen up here. I give presentations to students all the time, and I tell them, hey, when you do this, don't look back at the screen, always look at your monitor. And here I am doing the other thing. We run cohort systems, and we have 2 different things. For the people in this room, most likely the way you would engage is a 3-month engagement. So we take usually like a coaching profile, the way those structures are built, and we say, we're going to work 3 months at a time with you, and we call it the next difficult thing. Here's the fun fact about what the truth of entrepreneurship is in startups. I'm going to give you a different example that wouldn't be entrepreneurship. If my car breaks down, I leave my car with the mechanic, right? But notice what happens when entrepreneurship and the venture of startups gets difficult. You bring yourselves into a room. The first thing I understood a long time ago, especially when I was working through design projects and really complicated architecture projects that involve cities and engineers and all kinds of stuff, is that humans were the solution. And you have to pass the thread to the needle of the human, right? And that the more you start to understand human behavior, the more successful entrepreneurship becomes. The most recent research and studies actually prove this out. So our idea of being able to work in many different industries and support startup ventures came is that the common pieces actually exist in the person. And so the cohorts, what we do is we know that we can engage the entire company process by asking the founder, what is your next hard thing to achieve? Is it the final stage of prototyping, going to market strategy, raising funds? And through that, we can start to unravel what the issues are in the founder and what they need to work on, but also it touches the rest of their business. And so the conversations are good. We also know there's an exhaustion point. If you run, like traditional incubators will just run and run and run and run until everyone's exhausted. And that works sometimes, especially when you're taking equity. We do not. But we know that in the human space of creativity and innovation, which is one of the things professionally when I'm not doing this work, I also consult on innovation with established companies. The first thing I teach the CEOs is it's like a muscle, it has to rest. You can't just keep pushing and pushing. You can push in different layers and you can switch up different muscle groups as an entrepreneur, but usually you have to plan something for anywhere from 8 weeks to 3 months and then give it a rest and come back later. So a lot of our companies engage with us a little bit at a time, then they'll go away and they'll come back for a little bit more depending on what the next level is. If we really do our job well, they never come back at all because they know how to move forward on their own. And then again, we are aligned with resources all the way from understanding the university is actually the incubator. So when people say we want to build an incubator on campus, I'm like, well, it's difficult because we're at an incubator. Everything is happening here. It's a really, really perfect environment for that. But we also connect with funding resources, and we have a lot of trust in the VC community here. We also have trust with specific VCs nationwide that are interested in having a view, and private equity firms too. So if you're ready, we can help you get there and build the argument for that. The way it looks is we base everything around coaching platforms, which we've been trained to do, and we look at because that's the best way to have a conversation. And then we look into mentorship, which is basically giving some advice with some risk. We definitely don't do consulting because that's all risk, and we're not taking equity. We help you build network. We look at the community space for founders and try to get everybody connected. And more specifically, what we were asked to do by Lasan and the president of the university is how can we sit on companies and give them more attention when they're absolutely ready. So if you are in university research, if you're a post-market, you're already in the play and getting some revenue, we're good, or if you're funding ready. I will say if anybody in this room thinks that they're interested and they're saying, well, I'm not in the market, if you have a really, really advanced minimum viable product or really advanced prototype, and people are already responding to it, this often happens in research, you should still come talk to us. We just need something in the hand that's working. We got to go from idea to the thing. Whether we can click the button, hold it, turn it, twist it, or you have patient response, anything like that, that makes it helpful for us. The second phase of entrepreneurship after the idea stage is generally harder and needs more support. I want to talk a little bit about mindset because, again, I think if we can start here, then you'll absorb the rest of the day a little bit differently. This is really powerful stuff and something I've been able to practice and develop for, especially in creativity, authenticity, and innovation in the workplace. That's where I started. I've been unfolding this research for more than 15 years. I should say it's the study of research. There are much smarter people than me doing human behavior research. I just get to read it, connect it, tie it all back together, and play around with it in the classroom. I am the practitioner. And now that we get to practice it with startups and founders, we're seeing a lot of great success. And this is where I want to start. There's an absolute truth and a reality of how we exist. This is something I experienced early on as being an architect, is that I would go to client meetings and I would start to understand especially when I got more advanced in my career, that they could see the tip of an iceberg. And what I was presenting them represented something much larger with much greater currents, but I didn't have the time to explain it to them, nor were they paying me to explain it. They were paying me to have the problem solved and present it back to them. I think everybody in this room, especially my researchers, understands this feeling. So if we take this as a reality, that there's so much more behind the work we're doing, and I don't just mean the work in the lab or the work in entrepreneurship or the systems you're working on, but there's so much more work there. One thing we know about icebergs and things that behave this way is that the real thing that moves them is not the wind above the water, it's the currents below the water. There's really complicated things happening in human existence that actually move us forward as entrepreneurs. And when people come to us and say, we need funding, it's never about the money. It's usually about having and relating a different perspective to the company to start to assess the reality of what's going on, know where funding might exist and where they are, and see if you can make that bridge work. It becomes pretty structural above water, but really underneath, if I can't get that fixed, if I can't get that current moving in the right direction, the person will never get to the funding. And there's just and you see it because it usually comes with tremendous amounts of frustration, and if they would just understand me, all this stuff, right? That's what's below the water. Now, here's the really funny thing about entrepreneurship. Somebody was just asking me yesterday, give me some good books to read about entrepreneurship. And I said, well, I can give you the good books, but if you really want my advice on this, you need to go start something and do it. You need to start having conversations. Entrepreneurship is experienced in motion and movement. When you get into motion and movement, the book will come to you. You'll be exactly the point where you need to better understand how financing works and how early stage fundraising works, and you will read that book so fast. It will just sink in. But I would say start moving first. But most of what we see in entrepreneurship is built above the water. And then we say everything below the water is just lucky, or that person was born this way, or anything like that. But I promise you, 400 years ago, everybody was an entrepreneur. You had to be. Even if you were born into a family system, you had to be an entrepreneur for your company. Somewhere around the 1940s, we siloed everything and separated everybody. And we said, now you do this, and you do this, and you do this. But before that, people had a larger understanding. If you go far enough back, there was the Renaissance education, the idea you could understand everything within 12 to 14 years of education. They say now, I think it would take over 1,000 years. There's just too much out there right now. So if we can understand this a little bit, we have our greatest successes in the room when we deal below the water. Because once I can get clarity and understand where the movement is going and the currents that are kind of moving the person, what their motives are, what their values and what their ethics are, and how they like to work, we can start to build pathways and structures in front of them. And here's the cool thing. After that, it becomes effortless, and the founder can do it themselves. And this is the greatest gift you can give back to a founder. They can walk out of the room and they don't need us anymore. That's what I meant by that statement earlier. So we'll talk a little bit about how that works. Oh, there's the boat. It doesn't crash into it. It stops. It stops. So one thing, a concept I want to bring is that we are largely divided as a world. Ooh, that's a big statement today. But I want to kind of bring us back together today, maybe a little bit. And this is something that was really curious. It always really bothered me. My best friend growing up, since day one, I was born when he was 1 year old, moved in from Brooklyn, New York to Southeast Texas. So that was fun. The family was great. He's one of the leading clinicians of applying cancer research in the world. He runs a cancer institute for Sarah Cannon in Denver, Colorado, does amazing stuff. Anything that's new and coming to the forefront, he's on it. If anyone in this room has read the intro book to What Doctors, How They Learned About Cancer Research, he wrote that book. He worked for MD Anderson for years. He's brilliant. I'm really underperforming next to him. But something was really curious is the way he was very analytical in the way he solved problems. This kid started studying for his SAT when he was 12. The only way I could get him to go outside and play is I would have to do the flashcards with him for at least 30 minutes, and then like, can we go out now? But the way he solved problems was really interesting to me. But we would always end in really similar spaces, but I seemed to go through it in a much more confusing manner than he did. But there was something about the unfolding that was similar that would kind of haunt me for a long time. He always knew what he wanted to be. I always knew how I wanted to feel. And this is two different ways. And we both have had really interesting careers. And we still talk about this to this day. But in my research and looking at different behavioral research patterns, I started to understand that there were at least 4 different types, really there's 3, of behavioral patterns in how we understand and solve problems. The first that most everybody knows in this room is the scientific method, which is a long-standing principle and an incredibly successful, useful model to understand how we might build experiments, test them, prove them out, and validate them. Even the hypothesis that we all learn about and that you all practice, and my favorite, the null hypothesis, planning the space to fail, is really important. But design thinking, critical thinking, and human-centered design, which is actually very similar to design thinking, also are a process in which we unfold. And we can also identify careers with that. We can identify the vernacular we would speak in with those things. And they safely apply vernacular and vocabulary to each category so that the work can put itself together. But here's the fun thing. This is what tugged on me the whole time. And this came through the study of architecture. I had to deal with really mushy topics. Humans with lots of emotions that wanted to put things in places that other humans didn't want those things to be, and then working with cities and working with laws and working with ADA, then structure and engineering and all the process, even chemical behaviors and how VOCs work and architecture and all that good stuff. And I kept thinking, I'm doing subjective, objective work, quantitative, qualitative work every day, and it's coming together, and it comes together really well. The two don't necessarily always belong together when you're trying to compute and build structure and put numbers to things. But it still came together. And this is what I found out by doing the research. There are 7 natural behaviors in how we solve problems as humans. If we took the silos down and we put these up, we could all agree that these are the 7. I don't have to read them out to you. I always promise my students I won't read the slide. I try not to. And if we take these 7 pieces and we put them across the board, you will start to see the similarities. And the reason I say this is the entrepreneurial process is this. It unfolds the same way. So if you're in here and you want to start a company and you want to be a founder and you keep thinking the founder and the entrepreneur is other, it's actually embedded in the way that we unfold as humans and how we solve problems. And so what's inherent in you already, what has made you successful, what has gotten you to what are some incredible experimentations and ideas in this room. The knowledge base in this room is probably one of the greatest knowledge bases I will be in a room of people and at least the next 25 years. There's really incredible things coming out of here. It's all there. You have it. And if you can do your work, you just need to understand that it's the same way you took risks, the same way you were curious about your careers, is the same thing that requires an entrepreneur to move forward. We say this in our research cohorts all the time. Daniel's sitting in here. Because they come in, they say, well, there's a lot we don't know. And we say, that's really good. The first thing is recognize that. The second is use that as your strength. In the not knowing, you get to know the 6 things instead of the infinite things, which is the 6 questions: who, what, where, why, when, how, right? And knowing the questions are incredibly important. So I'm sure you're reading across here. My favorite one is the prototyping or test and experiment. Anybody who works with data knows that the way you select data is a form of prototyping. Because if you have to figure it out. Data comes to you and you think, oh, well, I've got data, it's going to solve itself. It doesn't. You have to ask the right questions to pull the right data out to make sure you're going to exist in your hypothesis and test it against your null hypothesis, right? Which is a really beautiful way of thinking, and it's exactly how entrepreneurs should be thinking. And I'm going to show you why most entrepreneurs have the wrong end of the stick here in a minute. All right. So that was the fun stuff to pull us together. We're all the same. We're all unfolding the same. The next thing is I'm going to talk about some qualities that are often not rewarded. How are we doing on time here? We're good. They're not rewarded in the way that all of you were able to sit in this room. And this is really important. Just hear me out here. Because I suffered this from the wrong direction. And then finally got into a space where it was rewarded. And now you're all sitting here from the other direction, and you need to do, these qualities are going to really help you excel and exceed. And it's about curiosity and how it works. We know that curiosity apparently kills a lot of cats. This is the thing. I always say cats have 9 lives, so they're good. They can handle it. Cats are also pretty awesome. But this is a quote that I really like. And it's to remind us that creativity, this idea of discovery, has a lot of qualities embedded in it. And I'm going to give you a list of qualities here in a second, but I want you to understand that if you remember being creative as a child and being rewarded for it, you can also remember somewhere in the process of your early education, K through 12, creativity was not rewarded. Getting an answer right was rewarded. Having more ideas than were necessary in a classroom were actually pushed against you. And as Malcolm Gladwell recently wrote about and presented about, was that it's not enough to just know the answer in this day and age. You have to be fast and know the answer. And I will tell you right now, I don't know a thing in nature that behaves that way, right? I mean, there's response and there's reaction and reflection, but planning to be fast and know the answer, I don't know what human that builds, but it seems that that human would be serving someone else's purpose and not their own. If we think about music, it absolutely must be the right answer to harmonize, but just to be fast, that's not going to work. It's too fast, right? So creativity is a thing that requires you to be curious, and curiosity tends to let go of all of your beliefs and your understandings, and you sit in a space for a minute and you start to understand time unfold in front of you, the way you want to experience things, the way you want to listen to things. And the proof of that is the scale of the science that's in this room. Some of you are at macro scales and studying the environment. Some of you are at micro scales, at the nanoscale, studying things that are very small, and time looks very different. Creativity allows you to understand those two things and to sit with those two things. And a lot of you know, too, that some of your research and experimentation has been because it's been sitting in the human mind for over 200 years, and finally there's the equipment to measure it. So understanding all of this is really important, because we arrive at these things not because we're fast and we're accurate. Usually there's a great opening up and asking of questions that happens there. So I always put this list up, and I bring this back, especially to my grads and undergrads, and I say, tell me that you can do any of these in a 10th grade algebra classroom and not be punished, right? Like, I'm really uncomfortable with this, and there's a lot of ambiguity, like, and start pushing the teacher on these kinds of things, and like, can you explain this, and why does the equation work this way, and what if it worked that way? Eventually, you're wasting everyone's time, and it needs to go faster, and you just need to study for a test in which no one cares if you miss 2 answers, because you go to the next material the next day. Everybody in this room broke free from that when you got into universities, especially when you got into your master's and your postdoc level work, where you were asked to be a lot more divergent in your thinking, which I'll talk about. But to tell you this, when I look at entrepreneurs and when we sit in the room, this is where we figure out the business. These are the traits and the behaviors of a good entrepreneur. I'm not saying do this alone. You must put the structure to this later and be above water. And you have to build the things that people will think are authentic and have been built well. But hopefully what I do in this room today is for anyone that's trying to figure out the next steps. And there's going to be ethical issues. Do I want to generate revenue from this great research that I want to give the world? Or there's going to be issues of just your own ability and your own permissions. Am I the one that gets to do this? Do I deserve to do this? And I think you can answer those questions. I'd love, off the stage, I could talk to you about my thoughts on all of it, because there's yes and no to all of the questions, depending on your perspective and how you want to approach it. And that's the key. All of this has to be approached through your perspective. This is the way entrepreneurship works. When I came over and we started to build this thing, I sat down with the president of the university, who basically said, I'm trying to figure out what to do over the next 5 years, especially with undergraduate education. I said, okay, this is great. What do you need to know? And he goes, what do we do different? I said, well, to me, it's pretty easy. I've been teaching for a while. The classroom will have to change. What does that mean? And I simply said this. This is a place of knowledge, great knowledge. He's like, absolutely. It's like, well, once you equate intelligence with knowledge and put both in the classroom, and not just the knowledge, you're going to change the classroom. And the way you answer that question comes from a lot of conversations that people need to have. We already know that with when AI slammed into our classrooms 2 years ago, and all of a sudden people were writing wonderfully and all these ideas were being generated, emails were amazing, students had incredible reasoning for why they should go from a B+ to an A-. It's just like a legal document. Yeah, it was pretty impressive. I was ahead of them though, so I always tell them, if you write to me in AI, I will write back in AI. We can do this all day. But this idea of intelligence, it goes back to critical thinking. And I don't really need to bring this to this room. All of you at some point had to dislodge from the system that works and go higher. You had to think for yourself. You had to edit. You had to become the editor over the authors. You had to select and figure out where you wanted to be. At some point, even my PIs in the room, you had a PI. And you had to start making the PI decisions because that was your next career move. And that felt different. This is intelligence. This is where you start to use your instinct. This is where you start to have what I call intuitional memory. You start to walk into rooms and you start to sense what leaders feel like and what good leaders and what bad leaders feel like. And it's all because of the built experience that you've had. Entrepreneurs have got to be really good at this too. This intelligence is really cooked up to about the age of 5 or 6 and then kind of gets squashed out of us because it's not rewarded in the classroom. Another fun fact, things like drawing and visual strategy are actually far more powerful, more than 100% more powerful than just writing stuff in a paragraph, and it's completely squeezed out of our education. A lot of scientists know this because diagrammatic work is incredibly important. Sorry, it's a little small up there. Little PowerPoint translation piece. But intelligence is what you use when you don't know what to do. And intelligence is about swimming in this large, dark, murky space. So I'm going to say that too, because entrepreneurs in the room that have been running businesses for a little bit understand that's your day-to-day. It's always unknown every day. To my scientists in the room, that is terrifying. It was unknown for this amount of time, and then we got into the scientific method. We got into the hypothesis and the structure, and now we get to exist in what's known. We're so terrified of the unknown, we build universities. We tell you get degrees. We build grant systems because the unknown is terrifying. That's what the structure is. Someone asked me once, what are you usually dealing with in the room? I was like, look, every human I know is just a model of how they deal with their own confusion. Right? The way you show up in a room is how you figure out how to not be confused. And that's how you organize yourself. It's how you conduct relationships. So the qualities between intelligence and knowledge look like this. And these are really natural on both sides. So abstract thinking, problem solving, adaptation, learning, and reasoning. This is usually when, especially I get researchers and scientists coming back, this is where we start to touch back and say it's okay to be a little soft in these areas and to not know and not have as much structure, because once you achieve clarity in these things, you will actually start to gain the structure that you need. Knowledge, we all know these, the awareness of facts, understanding of relationships, application, labeling of patterns. Again, why is entrepreneurship so difficult to get to? If you look at the Nobel Prize and things like this, it's for a project, it's for something that was solved, it's for the object and the result of what we do. When really we should be rewarding people for their process, for the left side. How do they keep showing up to problems? How do they bring communities together? When we start to change those systems, it gets better. So here's what I built all this up because I really sit with this quote right here. Now, nobody in this room, especially my scientists and researchers, are allowed to do this. You cannot show up with 42% inaccuracy. This is not good science. But somehow we invest billions, if not hundreds of billions in dollars in that 42%, blindly. And it also shows you, I said, the human shows up in the room to learn about this stuff. It shows you that a lot of the mistakes that are made in entrepreneurship are human-made mistakes. If science can accurately predict or find the Higgs boson particle, I believe we should be able to place companies into the market space with pretty good accuracy. This is a human error, not a structural error. So getting people aligned with the markets they're going into is really important. The reason I can tell you I know that this number can be improved is because we see it one-to-one relationship in the research cohorts that we work on here by approaching it from a different model. And we see that people can achieve success in different ways. And success even means when someone realizes, I'm not aligned here, I need to back out of this. That's what we understand, because when I say that 42% up there, these are companies that have been invested in. This is money that has been spent, capital that has been deployed on top of an idea. So the last piece I want to bring to you today looks a little bit like this. And it's just a reminder. Convergent thinking is where we sit. It's where we have our greatest successes. It's how we get our scores on our SAT. It's how we get our degrees. Everything comes to a point, an idea, or an object. But all of you that have done or finished these things realize there's something very ending and fleeting about these moments. And this is what we're trained on. It's what we do really well. But what I want to remind everybody today is executive function, executive leadership function, the way CEOs operate is through the process of divergent thinking. The idea that we can have a lot of answers for one thing and we can have conversations. And this is how we discover things. Usually before you get into your experiments and before you get into your work, you have some form of divergent thinking. When I work with CEOs on innovation culture, I tell them, this is great. They agree with me. This is great. This is what I do every day. I was like, yes, but if you put it in your structure, you're going to think that it's wildly inefficient because you can't do it forever. When divergent thinking is actually not equal to convergent thinking, it happens in a much shorter time span. I call it the weekend to the week. You have to allow it in your process. Entrepreneurship, though, everything you walk into has to be divergent. And the quality of divergent thinking, especially when you put them together, we're always opening and compressing. And usually we go through 2 iterations to get to a good answer. A lot of times I would encourage 3 to 6 to get there. But the idea is that we're never seeking answers. We're always working through questions and information. Questions reveal information, more questions reveal more information, and it never ends. And once you understand that, your work continues, you have process, you have a career, you have a life you get to talk about. And the innovation workshops that I do, I say once you find the answer, you put a flag in the ground and you've given your competition a thing to move around. When you find your process, the way Apple did for a long time, it's a little different now. They're struggling a little bit. They found their process and they moved past everybody in really unlikely scenarios. This is how we do it. So really just permission and encouragement to open back up and understand too that when you open up, you have to let go of ideas and you have to listen differently. This is where the science comes in. Newtonian physics and even some quantum physics is going to give you a lot of structure and answers around all this loose information. Students get really, when I work with companies and students, they get nervous. Look at all the information I found. In fact, if I go back to this slide, this is a board of a student trying to seek information. This is what their mind looks like. They're terrified of this. This is not an answer. This is more disorganized. And the first question I ask them is, what patterns do you see in here? They sit on it for a minute and they start to circle the things that are coming up in their intuition. And once they circle it, they realize that's the path. That's the first wind that catches the sails that moves them. And they feel more aligned and they start to understand their why. And so this is, if I can get entrepreneurs to do this more often, it doesn't take long to get to these processes. You can go back to the work of convergence and problem solving and put all these great tools and all this great science together and all the great financial pieces together and people that want to help you and build structure to your idea. So the quality of success look like this. Last 3 slides. Curiosity-driven exploration. Just always curiosity. This is something. And notice how it's defined here, epistemic curiosity, the idea of seeking new knowledge, which means it's going to tie itself back to structure, so you don't have to see it as wasteful. Curiosity is often seen that way. And then iterative learning and resilience. It's only failure if you quit. I know we've read that somewhere on a TikTok or an Instagram, but it's absolutely true. Sam and I have been in the room so many times now it's been hundreds of companies for me. It's just the iterative process. If you wait long enough and you keep moving forward and you keep trying, we get great results and we get success. It's never often what it looked like. Like this, a good example is when you walked into this room, you understood the room. That's entrepreneurship. But by the time you got to your seat, you understood the room differently. That's entrepreneurship. You still got to your seat. But you may have met 5 people on the way. You may have sat somewhere different than you thought you would. But you're still here. You're still listening and achieving your objectives. And then user-centric engagement. It's basically my academic speak for basically saying, go talk to people. Cord does this really well. They have a program that forces researchers to go out and start interviewing all these random people. And that is actually the #1 thing you should start doing if you're serious about running your business. So I'll leave you with this. Innovation is what we're all doing in this room, and it really is just creativity and motion. You should embrace these things. But I also like to say, to calm everybody down, it is deliberate and responsive to real information and experiences. I believe in this. I think the two go really nicely together. Thank you for your attention and your time today.
Thank you so much, Cord.
Yes.
Right here.
Out of curiosity, it doesn't matter what type of company joins the Doman program?
No. As long as you're, not crushing the world, you're good. We'll help you out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So to give you a scale, I mean, we work with everyone. The TLO specifically, we've built out an arm for. So if you're a researcher on campus, you're in a room with your people because the conversations tend to tie that way. Daniel, can you raise your hand? If you see Daniel around, he can tell you what we do in the research cohorts. He's had some really cool successes too. If you're outside of that, we have our community room, and it's everyone from 18 to 82. And we've had all kinds of companies come in, service-based, SaaS companies, physical product. I mean, it doesn't matter if you can create a transaction out of it. It can even be, I mean, we work in social impact as well. So we want to help you understand that and figure out how you can be successful.
So I like your idea of convergent versus divergent thinking. So as I'm a scientist by training, I'm trained to think in a convergent way.
Yes.
So now I'm an entrepreneur. So how can I rewire my brain to think in a divergent way?
It's really hard. It's really hard. I think you have to go back and take the first parts of your scientific career and understand that we have infinite number of answers. There are only 6 questions in the world that define space, right? The why is immeasurable. So when you figure out your why, it's really important. And then to calm you down, the who, what, where, when are all, they apply to Newtonian physics. They are measurable things. Those are the pieces you work with. And the how is your process. And I would say go back and just ask yourself the why first, and then build out your model. By the time you get to the 6th question, you'll be back into your convergent mind, and you'll feel very comfortable. So if you're asking me, it comes with a willingness to ask questions and look for reality. Look for what's in front of you. Don't tell yourself a story. Just see the business model. That's probably the best way to get to it. I think the shortest answer, though, to you is you've been relying on answers your whole life. Figure out the questions again. Go become proficient at asking questions, especially the why. Very, very important. And while we walk the mic over, I think who was it? A philosopher had said this: when you have the why, there is no how that is unachievable. Yes.
So you had mentioned you had limited space, and I just reviewed your website. It looks like there's a spring cohort that was already executed. What's the situation for summer, or do we have to wait until fall?
Sure. We run about a 5-week shorter summer cohort to come in, and the fall we'll run 2 at a time. So we haven't really had to turn anybody away for volume. The filtration system brings just the right amount of people each time. And if someone's not ready, we usually say, get these 3 things done, come back, talk to us. So there's never a no, it's just get here and then we can work with you. But the fall applications are open right now. We will start reviewing those this summer, and we do a rolling acceptance. So if you just meet the fit, you'll be in. And then we're trying to figure out how to keep expanding based on the numbers. But the point I'm making is in the room, we generally don't work with more than 3 or 4 ideas at a time. So in the space that we work. We don't overcrowd the space.
Hey, so as a scientist, I became very identified with being intelligent and appearing intelligent. How can we get more comfortable with looking stupid as an entrepreneur, or feeling that way even if we don't?
Daniel? This is exactly their question when they come in the room. I think, so again, once again, your entire life and career has kind of been built on the idea that you know. And entrepreneurship, and anyone in here, like I know we have a lot of really good people in this space, Ken Kroll sitting back there, it's about what you don't know as being the most important thing, because you get to learn it, discover it, and rebuild the structure you want. So I think you, really honestly, Daniel, I think you have to get in a space where there's a little bit of trust and you can practice. And when you start to see enough people respond to you in really positive ways and get curious with you, you'll start to trust it more. It's a bit of a different environment, if I can offer that.
That was a really great question from the last person. So you said that 42% of companies end up failing because they don't know how to interpret their data. So how do you go about figuring out what conclusions can even be derived from the data in front of you?
Well, iCore actually does a really great job at this. It really happens through the process of investigation and interviewing all potential partners. So I'll give you a really good example. A lot of people say, I want to go to market and I can see that it's popular. That's not enough. You've got to figure out, like, how can you go touch it and it touches you back? And so we look at all kinds of things, and especially people who want to get funding, they keep looking at banks or they look at VC and other things, and like, here's a strategy. I'm like, have you talked to the factories that will build this yet? No, of course not. We don't have the money. We can't pay them. And I'm like, well, they have money, and they have time and space, and they can handle the thing. They could be a partner. Go talk to them. I find that people don't get far enough down the stream. So usually by the time someone investigates the market, potential customers, who's going to build it or service it or whatever it is you're doing, once you get the full view, you have de-risked it. So it's not that different than the scientific method and how a lot of the researchers in here do their work, right? You just got to be willing to ask questions far enough out. People just don't think they have permission. They don't know that it's okay. But I find that people who are out in business and making more business and want to do things, and it's not all bad people, there are really good people in the world that want to try to do right and do better. They want to help you out. So curiosity, basically. You'll get good numbers if you do that, reliable numbers.
Hi, I have a logistic question. So if we want to connect sooner than later, and do we have to wait for the application, so we just write an email? Like, how do we start this conversation?
So the application is open. We keep it rolling and open all year, and you get to select which cohorts you would like to be in. So some people's schedules, like they're better in the spring than the fall. And then from there, if we need to talk to you, we will. We like for people to come into the room and kind of experience it a little bit. If you are a researcher at the U, feel free to reach out to us. We have a little bit of a different path. Just because the nature of that work, and I said earlier, the vernacular of the work is different, we'll talk to you about it. But it's ongoing and rolling, and if it scales enough, we'll build more rooms for it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, when I say exclusive, it's just, we just don't put a lot of people in a room. We found it works much better when it's 3 or 4.
So sending an email before the application is fine?
Say that again?
Sending an email explaining our case or whatever project.
That's totally fine, yeah, and then we'll direct you to the application, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Absolutely. And specifically, again, for the room, even if you have the idea and you're not ready for the studio, we'll still sit down and talk with you for an hour and kind of hear where you're at and kind of give you some milestones to hit and show you that it's probably a lot closer than you think it is.
What's it like to work at the Doman? Like, how do you become a staff member of such an organization or institute?
We'll be growing and probably in the next year or two. We have great partners like Lassonde and other things on campus, and they really gave us a target. And wow, was it a target? There's a big need there. Just keep tabs with us, and things will open up soon. And especially in kind of expanding the reach that I have going into the rooms, and Sam as well, and expertise. We also work with one of the analysts on campus, Ainsley Lloyd. So she comes in part-time and works with us, with the researchers, because she knows that system really well. So depending on the structures we support, we try to hire people that will help do that with us. Thank you. Yep. Great questions.